Welcome to Hoche Hour, which is a place to get inspired by leaders in law, in technology and international affairs. I'm Jean-Rémi de Maistre, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Jus Mundi, and tonight with us we have Claudia Salomon. I shouldn't present her, but I can still say that Claudia is the president of the International Court of Arbitration of the ICC. Claudia, thank you very much for being with us tonight. It's a pleasure. Would you please introduce yourself briefly?
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Jean-Rémi, and to Jus Mundi, and to all of you for being here. I am the president of the ICC International Court of Arbitration. I think as a further introduction, I would say that I am a genuinely curious person. I am somebody who believes there is a solution to every problem and am somebody who can get things done.
So you should work in a startup, actually. So we have a tradition at Jus Mundi to ask people to share a fun fact about themselves. What is yours?
My fun fact is I make my own granola.
Oh.
And it's very delicious. It has maple syrup and a lot of nuts, no oil, so if you need the recipe, I can share it.
So next time we do Hoche Hour, maybe we should do it in the morning.
Yeah,
and
breakfast.
do the breakfast. I can share also a fun fact about both of us. So when you arrived in Paris 4 years ago, it was just after Jus Mundi first big fundraising, the Series A1. And we decided to do some communication with ICC, and it was a moment when you arrived and we wanted to do some TV. And for me, it was the first time I was going on TV to do something like that, and I asked to have a media training. And because Claudia just arrived in Paris, we said, okay, why do you want to join? And so the first time we met was for a media training, which was a good one. I think I learned a lot for that. It was a good one. So let's start with knowing a bit more about yourself. Where did you grow up and how did it shape you?
I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, which is about 160 kilometers south of Washington, D.C. But to put it in context, it was the 1970s, so it was very contentious time in terms of race relations. There were real questions about whether the schools would even open at that time. My parents were from New York, and so it was like being an immigrant in another country. We were the only Jewish family in my school. And so I would say how it shaped me most is that I really have an understanding of what it is like to be the other.
Mm-hmm. And did it play a role in your decision to become a lawyer, you think?
I was definitely one of those people by the age of 8 that knew I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I didn't know any lawyers, but it must have just been because I was so argumentative.
And if you wouldn't be a lawyer, what would you do?
Well, I do have the 2 core moves you need to have if you are a third base coach in baseball.
Okay.
The 2 moves are basically this, which is stop, and, keep going. So I could do that. But otherwise, I could probably just organize your closet.
Oh. Okay, I will take you. Okay, last quick question. What is a lesson that you have learned very early on that has stayed with you all the time?
I would definitely say it was when I was working in Arizona as a mid-level junior associate. One of the other lawyers on the team emailed our opposing counsel instead of co-counsel. And so the head of the group just snapped right into action, because you have to do certain things to try to, you can't just recall the message, to try to assure that the parties, the lawyers would not be utilizing it, etc. And I just really remember going down the elevator with him after this crisis in which he had not gotten angry or shown anger.
Okay.
And I commented to him that was surprising. And he said something very powerful to me, which was, we are only the product of our experiences. And so everybody was gonna learn from that. Mm-hmm. But the other really powerful thing for me was that as the leader of that group, it was his job to fix it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really an important job, whether you're a partner, a senior associate, or a team leader on anything. The reason you're in that role is to fix the problems that exist.
Yeah, I like that. And I've made a few mistakes in my life, and including last year. And for one of those, the consequences were quite painful. And I remember saying to someone here, like, okay, remind me that the most painful the lesson, the most valuable the mistake, and you should also cherish this and make something out of it. Okay, so do you know François Mitterrand? Did you know before? Okay. François Mitterrand was a French president that would be described in the US as communist for sure, and maybe he was a bit communist. He was president in the 80s, but he actually tried to be a president from the 50s. So he had this idea very time before. And a few years before he died, he was asked by a journalist, Mr. President, how hard it is to become the president of France? And he answered, you know what? It's actually very simple. The only thing you have to do is to decide it. So my question is, when did you decide to become or try to become the president of the ICC Court, and what was the process behind that?
In, I think, April 2020, so 6 years ago, it was announced that there would be an open process for the selection of the next president of the ICC Court. So ICC published the names of the selection committee, published the process, the timeline, and the criteria, and what you would need to submit. And just to put that in context, it was the very beginning of the pandemic. For me personally, my husband and I were at the last stages of building our house in the Hudson Valley, which was really a 5-year project. I had been a lawyer for more than 25 years in large law firms. I felt kind of ready for an executive role, but there was no push factor, and I wasn't ready to be an independent arbitrator. And with that announcement, I really kind of reflected that my career in international arbitration was intertwined with the ICC. Mm-hmm. And I had been serving as a court member and a vice president. And I also realized that Alexei Moore was my age when he became the president. So, of course, he seemed so much more senior 6 years on, but it wasn't that I was younger than he had been when he became the president. And I just thought, I actually have the qualities, the experience, and the ideas. So you have to decide it, and also feel that ambition is not a dirty word.
Because it wasn't always the case for you to feel.
I think there's always that sense of, if someone's ambitious, sometimes that gets described in a negative way. I remember when candidates for the presidency of the United States were being described as ambitious, and it's like, of course you are ambitious if you think or want to pursue this, but you have to decide it. So to realize that, yes, actually I could be somebody that could do this.
It took me a bit of time as well. I think maybe for French people it's particularly difficult because we are taught to not do too much.
Mm-hmm. And I think for women that is a quality that is not looked kindly on for women more generally.
Good. So let's be ambitious, all of us, tonight. So looking at your achievements and everything that has led you here for this role, there is also this saying by Steve Jobs. So he actually said that during a very famous conferences to students, I think in 25 in Stanford. And he said that, we shouldn't be afraid to have experiences, especially even experiences that seems to be wasteful or unrelated to what we do at the time, because we cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. And in his case, one of the examples is say like he was studying calligraphy at the university. And it is thanks to that after he realized that to create a word, you need to have some fonts, and it will look much better if people can choose the fonts, okay? And so my question to you is, what are the surprising dots that have led you to become the ICC Court President?
Yeah. Definitely moving to Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, my husband went to graduate school in creative writing. We did long distance for 2 years, and that got very boring. So I made the decision to make the great leap across the country to Phoenix, Arizona, where I knew no one other than my husband and really had misconceptions of the city itself. And I had been working in Richmond, Virginia before, doing mostly representation of cities and towns and commercial litigation, but I was really interested in voting and political participation and working in a firm. And so I thought maybe I would just do the same type of work in Arizona. And it was 1998, and the head of litigation at then Squire Sanders, in my interview, said that international arbitration was the wave of the future. Oh, really? And so it was like the scene from the movie The Graduate with, Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft, where the line is plastics. But I really thought about it, and it made sense, because as there would be more cross-border trade, there would necessarily be more cross-border disputes. And so while I continued to do commercial litigation and even represented the city of Phoenix, then I began to do some international arbitration, and then, long story short, had the opportunity to go to Prague in the Czech Republic for 3 years, and my career took a completely unexpected turn.
Do you want to tell us a bit more about this first experience with arbitration in Prague?
So I had done some arbitration cases in Arizona. The Office of Squire was actually representing clients not just in Arizona, but really across the country and internationally. But the firm had been hired to represent the Czech Republic in Saluka versus Czech Republic, which was then, in 2001, the largest or one of the largest investment treaty cases until that time. It was just a few weeks after September 11th, and the head of litigation asked me, how was my caseload? How are you doing? Would you like to go to Prague? And I had never heard of an investment treaty at that time. And so on 5 days' notice, I went originally for a month and then stayed for 3 years.
Yeah. So you had no idea you'd become the president of the court at that time?
Definitely not.
So you are the first woman to be the president of the court, which is a bit crazy when we think of it after 100 years of existence of the court. What does it mean to you, and what do you think it can mean for future women aspiring to this role?
I think the meaning is really twofold. The first is really, I would say, the line from Billie Jean King, which is, if you can't see it, you can't become it. And so many women around the world have really communicated that having a role model or someone they see as a role model is really important for their perception of themselves as potentially pursuing something grander than they have done in the past. So that is incredibly meaningful, and we certainly know that about women and people of color, which is having role models really shapes their perception of what they can do. For me personally, it really meant I had to think about what was going to be my communication style, because I couldn't just emulate my predecessors. And so I really had to think about what did that mean in this post-COVID or emerging out of COVID environment where people wanted much more of a sense of connection and kind of really figure out how to walk the line of providing human stories and speaking in a way that I thought of as plain speaking that could potentially create a sense of connection without losing the legitimacy or importance of the institution and the office.
I think you did a great job. Are you happy about what you achieved?
I do feel really happy about this. I feel that it is indeed powerful to communicate in ways that people can relate. And I really, in this job, I wake up every day thinking about how I can communicate better.
And I think the role model is so important in all aspects of our life, to be able to imagine before to be ambitious. I think it comes even before the ambition. So would you have an advice that you would give to other leaders, both women but also maybe men, how to to avoid repeating maybe the same scenario and mistakes over the future, and what can be done to not prevent the woman from dreaming or being ambitious like that?
One of the things we know from studies, and it was written about quite a bit by Sheryl Sandberg, who had previously been at Facebook, is that women frequently do not apply for jobs if they don't meet all of the criteria. And men will apply for jobs even if they don't meet all of the criteria. So I think the messaging that she had was really powerful, which is oftentimes go for something. You might wind up being the right person for the role. And also her messaging was really about don't think of the hurdles that could arise before they have arisen. Mm. So like the classic example would be a woman not taking a job because, well, she's not sure if she were to have a kid, how she would manage it. And as opposed to potentially getting the job, deciding you wanting to have a child, and then figuring it out at the time. And if it doesn't work out, then you can do something else. But not putting those hurdles in front of you before they've even arisen.
It's a great sharing. I mean, we had this experience at Jus Mundi. We had a very good HR leader a few years ago, and she made us a few sentences saying like, okay, if you do not fit all the criteria, still apply and maybe it will work out. And I was like, okay, is it really helpful as a man? But we had several candidates telling us like, yeah, I did it because I've seen this line and it really changed my perspective about it. So we've talked about some lessons learned, like the ambition lesson. There is another lesson that I have learned from a woman leader that I met in very random circumstances. She was the president of the Order of the Chartered Accountant in France, and she was also the first woman to be a president, and it was a few years ago. And she taught me how to be able to say no in a respectful way, which is very difficult. It took me really 10, 15 years, and I still have to learn how to do it better. But she unblocked something for me at that moment. How did you learn this lesson yourself?
No. In this job, I have to say no every single day, given the number of invitations I receive to speak or travel or something. So I have approached it in this role the way I have basically approached my work in the past, which is to decide to be really proactive rather than reactive. And to be proactive, you need to basically have a business plan or a strategy, and then decide what you want to do, and then you say no to everything else, and leave a little room for some unexpected. But that kind of makes you feel good about saying no, because you then know you're sticking with your strategy. And I've come up with all kinds of personal policies as well. So for example, during Paris Arbitration Week, I would get so many invitations from every firm in Paris to speak. And so I actually just made a policy that I am not speaking at any firm events during Paris Arbitration Week that are open to the public. If they're open only to their clients or it's a private event, then that's something I would consider. And that way, if people want to hear me speak, they'll come to the ICC conference. So coming up with these kind of approaches, and then it's easy to say no, because I can say, oh, I actually have a policy on that.
Okay. But was it always that easy to do it for you? Or?
I think because I have really been focused on having kind of personal business plans, even if I wasn't creating a business plan for a practice group, then I think I'm able to then say I really want to stick with that plan.
And so you have personal goals that you review regularly as well?
Absolutely, and I think that's really important because you can't do everything. And if you take on a really big project, like the year I co-edited a book, then I had to say, okay, this is the main thing I'm doing, and then I'm not going to write a lot of small articles or chapters in other people's books. Or when I was on the ICC Court as a court member then, or a vice president, it was like, okay, that's the main outside activity, and then I didn't join other organizations in other leadership roles.
Yeah, that's a topic that we often discuss at Jus Mundi as well, how to be focused on the writing, and how to manage saying no to the rest of your colleagues, knowing that you also sometimes want to help as much as possible.
But somebody actually today just was telling me she was worried that if she said no, she would not then get an invitation the subsequent year. But what you say in that context is, thank you so much for the invitation. This year I'm really have scheduling issues, but I hope you'll keep me in mind for next year.
Right, you prepare the ground. There is actually an interesting study that was made by Jus Mundi and ICC together with McCann three years ago, I think, which was about how to do business and how to resolve disputes across different cultures. And the studies came with a lot of interesting findings, including one that Americans are kind of chameleons because they are used to multiculturalism. They can adapt to many different cultures easily. And I was wondering first if you recognize yourself in such description. And second is, how do you connect with people fundamentally different from you when you travel, when, not only lawyers, people from companies, etc. How do you build this connection beyond the high diversity of the arbitration world?
I don't know if it's so much adaptation to other culture, but to be genuinely interested in other cultures, and then recognizing that there are many ways to do things that can all be positive, or seeing how another culture does something, see that might actually be a better way to do something. So that's why people study comparative law. You have a better understanding of your own systems, and then see that there are multiple ways to achieve due process, for example. So I think that's very core. Leading a team that's cross-cultural, I think, is kind of part of leading any team, which is recognizing that absolutely everyone on the team, from the assistant, the secretary, to everyone, has something really important, and your success depends on every single person. And in a cross-cultural team, the language around that really matters. So, for example, I was always very conscious to use the term co-counsel rather than local counsel, because you're really equating that the person is that you're working with.
Respect,
yeah, it's respect, and you're working with, as opposed to they're like something else. And when I was working, let's say, between New York and London, we had to recognize that we really had different ways of spelling things and very different grammar rules. And so we actually had to create an internal guide, because if we were writing briefs, we were editing each other's work back and forth and just make some decisions. And so at one point we just reached a compromise, and it was, we can have English spelling, but I really wanted US grammar.
Yeah, it's always a fine line between adapting to others and just also being yourself and working together like that. When you travel so much, there is also the question of how to maintain energy and focus, and also social energy, because it drains a lot, even if you enjoy it, but to be with people and to connect. How have you done that over the last 5 years? Because you seem to be as energetic than when I met you the first year.
So I'm a Pilates devotee, and have started taking private Pilates lessons as much as possible when I travel. So I took private Pilates lesson in Johannesburg, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, not in Cape Town, somehow they couldn't get me in, but Houston, Miami, Geneva. So that has been really valuable. To recharge, though, I really have to have some really quiet time, and I never watched trashy TV before this job, but now I actually watch some serious trashy TV because it is really the only way for me to just empty my mind, recharge, and then somehow on Monday I'm ready to go.
That's a good one, I do as well. What is the worst advice that you ever received about being a better leader or about anything? What is the worst advice that you received?
Probably the worst advice was to not use hand gestures when speaking.
You had that. I received the same at university, actually. Yeah.
But now I've gotten wonderful counter advice from Michael Chad Hepner, who I can completely recommend his book, Don't Say and he really says use your hand gestures to emphasize your points as you would in speaking.
Yeah, it's good, and it's about knowing how to use it correctly, when to use it. It's like when you have slides, you know it needs to hit at the moment you are saying something and not. I mean, one day we could talk about slides in the legal world because a lot of them are so busy that there is a lot there to improve. What is the trip that you enjoyed the most last year, or the one that was the most surprising?
Probably the most surprising, I remember our talking about it over dinner, was going to Riyadh and going to a Chinese restaurant, which in and of itself could be surprising, but actually having dinner with a dozen Chinese in-house lawyers who lived in Riyadh. They were working for Chinese companies that were doing business in Saudi, and that was like that emoji where your head explodes.
Yeah, we all live different lives. That's the beauty also of traveling and meeting people in different places. I will share also another story from a book that I've read, which is a very interesting book. Maybe I can offer it to you as well. It's called Built to Last, and it's an analysis that has been done by a US professor about several companies that we could qualify as legendary companies. So you can take Walt Disney, for instance, and many others. And the authors, actually it's two of them, they compare those legendary companies that have made it over decades with other companies that have been good but not legendary. And they've tried to assess what made the difference between those and what are the common points between those legendary companies. One of the factors is the capacity for the organization to build very strong and followed processes across the organization, but at the same time being capable of breaking the processes when it makes sense and totally innovating from there. And by already experiencing in a small company like Jus Mundi how the tension between both is difficult to achieve, I can realize how much it's valuable. But he didn't say you need to be right in the middle. No, he said you need to be able to do both very well and to decide when to switch from one to another. So my question is, with ICC, which is a 100 years organization, and we could qualify as a legendary organization, today we're in the middle of the AI revolution, which is for the legal world clearly the most important technological revolution in history. How to manage that?
I would say we are tackling it the same way that we have tackled so many other issues, even if this is the most dramatic. But the reality is the core identity of the ICC Court and ICC Dispute Resolution Services is that they have constantly evolved. You know, our rules have been revised more than 10 times. Our headquarters have stayed in Paris, but we have opened offices around the world. The services have changed. The secretariat and the court have completely changed in terms of the makeup and now reflect the global community. So we have to look at this change in the same way. Our unique aspect is really the ability to meet the evolving and changing needs of the parties.
So the organization already knows how to do both.
There are challenges with long-established organization, and the unique aspects of ICC is both its strength and the things you have to tackle, as with any big organization.
I mean, having worked with ICC for a few years now, I can tell you that I've been impressed by the speed of certain decisions. Of course, it depends on the cases, and what we are living at the moment is a big evolution. But compared to what everyone is doing on the market, ICC is quite efficient. So it leads me to my last question before we open the floor to a few questions and then conclude, which is a very, very simple question. What is the future of arbitration powered by AI?
It's not the future, it's the now. That's the simple answer. But look, from our perspective, we just reached a new stage of our agreement between ICC and Jus Mundi to have our entire digital library now powered and accessible through Use AI. And so everyone is engaging in arbitration powered by AI, and now we're going to see the next stages in the future.
And you have here in the room engineers and lawyers who have been working on this integration for many weeks in order to make sure that Use AI still deliver a very high quality of result with the ICC DLL, because every time we feed new data, we need to make sure that it is adapted to that. So yeah, we are very proud.
And we're very grateful.
Now we'll open the floor to questions, and I will take the flying mic for you. So please don't be shy. Raise your hand. We don't take a lot, but we can take a few. Okay, the back, you get it. Woohoo!
Hi, Claudia. I want to ask, what is the biggest failure of your life? Like when you felt like, damn, I'm done.
That's easy for me. It's my failure to speak multiple languages. It's really my Achilles heel.
Yes. Sometimes it's better not to speak than to speak with a strong accent.
So, thank you for the talk. I'm the head of experience for Jus Mundi, and we focus a lot on the why. And when you told that women don't apply to jobs because they don't think they're qualified, like, why would you think that they don't apply for those jobs either way?
I do think it's because there's a perception that these are the requirements, and therefore it would be hard to imagine that somebody would think of you outside of those requirements. So, but it also gets described by certain authors as a confidence gap, where if you are willing to apply for something that you are not qualified for on paper, you have to just have a level of confidence that goes beyond the average. That would be just feeling like, well, people would love me no matter what. So there's certainly been lots written about how people can gain confidence in a way that can be productive rather than overconfident, which can also be debilitating.
Thank you. If you look at this fancy posters, it's the values of Jus Mundi: explorative, committed, friendly, Excelsior. Within the Excelsior, there is make mistakes, don't repeat them. Essentially, that's everything like JR asks at each interview.
Yeah.
And if the candidate says, I never made any mistake, complicated. So the question is, what's the mistake that you've made and you've never repeated it and it helped you into life? Yeah.
In my career, I remember that when I was working in Prague, I got asked to go to London to meet with a client or potential client about a matter in Slovakia. And I was so excited that I got the opportunity to go that I hadn't really focused on the fact that I was not going to be able to answer any of the questions about Slovak law. And the dinner went terribly because, of course, the person had all those questions that I could not answer. And so that was a big mistake, and it meant something that I have not repeated, which is to realize that you're much stronger as a team. And oftentimes people are hiring a law firm or hiring or wanting to work with Jus Mundi because you have the ability to bring lots of different types of people with different skills together in order to offer this very special service.
Hi Claudia, thank you for sharing your insights. My question is very specific to your vision for the ICC in the next 10 years, and what plans or strategies or vision do you have to have young arbitral appointments in the ICC, specifically under 40? We have the young ICCF and we have all the events coming up, but what is your vision for having underrepresented groups, countries, arbitrators from there, as well as like arbitrators under 35 represented as arbitrators for the ICC?
Yep. Most people do get their first arbitrator appointment from an institution, and we do make many first-time appointments when the case is right for that. So if we have a case involving $100 million and it's a complex construction case, the parties would fall on the floor if we were to appoint a first-time arbitrator who did not have the relevant experience. So we have to be conscious of that. What we are always looking out for are the people who have the relevant experience, whether that is as counsel in ICC cases or even as arbitrator in non-ICC cases. We have launched now advanced arbitrator academies in 6 parts of the world, which have been incredible training programs. So they're regional, and the cohorts are usually around 40 people, a year-long program where people who want to really pursue work as an arbitrator apply to become a part of that and have really come out with that experience. And then they are people we are also really keeping in mind. Other ways in which we're really focused on diversity broadly defined is also saying if a case is involving the Middle East, are there people from the Middle East that we can appoint? If the case is involving civil law, we are almost certainly appointing a civil lawyer rather than, just someone from London or otherwise to make those appointments. So it's something that we are very conscious of. The last thing I just want to say, ICC only makes 25% of the appointments of arbitrators. 75% are nominated by the parties or by the co-arbitrators with input from the parties. So it really takes all of us to make a huge change.
Thank you.
Behind you.
So earlier on you spoke about how you wake up every day and say to yourself, how can I communicate better? I was interested to know, as the first woman in such a prestigious and global role, essentially what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
So I have really focused from even before I formally started, but after it had been announced that I would be the president, to focus on ensuring that every aspect of international arbitration has a client mindset where we are focused on the needs of the parties with paramount perspective, and that we are thinking about how to meet and exceed client expectations every day. When I remember giving this lecture in April 2021 with that title, my husband thought that was really basic, and other people in the arbitration space told me it was like an earthquake, that we were focused on the parties and focused on service. And so if any aspect of my legacy, and I will leave it for others to assess, but I think that will be a key component of what people will think of that I have been focused on throughout the entire time of my presidency.
And I think people see one of your main impact this one. This is the first thing I have in mind too, and that this is so important, especially nowadays for arbitration. Okay, so
I was even allergic to the word user because to me, people who are users are using needles. And so the idea that it's like users of arbitration was so strange. And, you know, law firms don't have users. You have clients. And in fact, your goal is to be, as a lawyer, a trusted advisor, like to be a consigliere in the true sense of the term, not as a mob term, but a true trusted advisor. And people are picking their lawyers based on who they want to work with, who do they trust. And so that's really what is driving my thinking about how people are going to choose ICC arbitration or something else.
Well, now I feel bad about calling people using Jus Mundi users. And so we move now to our final questions. And the first that I want to ask you is a book or a resource that you would like to share as an advice for people here and people who will listen to us online.
It's not a new book, but I highly recommend the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. Basically demonstrating how the use of checklists can really increase accuracy when addressing complex issues. So when I was practicing, I remember we worked with the paralegals to put together checklists for all of our submissions because you basically have to do the same set of things all the time. And I was making these ad hoc checklists. But there's one aspect of the book I just want to quickly highlight, which is this. You know, Gawande developed a checklist for surgeries to minimize mistakes that would be made. But one of the items on the checklist that got added was that before a surgery started, everyone in the operating room needed to just pause and actually go around and introduce themselves. And so the nurse would say, hello, I'm this person, and Atul Gawande, as the chief surgeon, would say, and I'm Atul Gawande. And what that resulted in was a dramatic reduction in mistakes and a dramatic reduction in death. Because it meant that just being a human and acknowledging each other, which is obviously so core in French culture, as you know, saying bonjour was key because that meant everyone on the team felt they had the ability to speak up and when there was something going wrong, whereas otherwise people did not feel they could do that. And also it increased a sense of job satisfaction and connection to the team.
Also, I didn't know about the book, but it clearly rings a bell. I think I've told you, but I've been learning how to fly over the last months, and it's insane the number of checklists that there is for everything, before to turn on the engine, before to fly, before to land, before everything. And I think now I understand the value. It's really, it creates automatism and you are sure to not do the mistake and you just follow step by step. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, it starts with an analysis of how pilots use these checklists and how they got created, because it can't be too detailed, but it can't be too general.
Yeah. Okay, it leads me to my second question, which is who would you recommend us to receive at Hoche Hour at the next edition?
Yeah. Well, I would recommend Dr. Joy Bulamwini.
Okay.
She has founded it's the Algorithmic Justice League, and she has done incredible analysis on racial bias in AI-driven technology. And she has an incredible video that I urge everyone to watch called Ain't I a Woman, using the Sojourner Truth quote.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And now leading to the last question that we ask also to everyone coming at the Hoche Hour. So first, the mission of Jus Mundi is powering global justice. I think it's written there. What is your definition of justice? And what is something that we could all start doing tomorrow or today to move the world in that direction of more justice?
Well, I have been thinking a lot about justice in the context of AI. So I really think of justice as, fairness, equality, and the rule of law. And in terms of advice, I really am drawn to the quote from Martin Luther King, which is a paraphrase actually of a 19th century abolitionist, but it's that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it curves toward justice. And there's an important caveat to that President Obama has made, which is that the curve toward justice does not curve on its own. That it takes work. You have to pull it in the direction of justice. Like democracy, it's not self-executing. It requires a lot of effort. But Obama was quoted as saying that he has seen so many people standing up for their convictions. So my message to all of you is to stand up for your convictions and to provide the support and lift others up when they are doing that. The road may be bumpy, but as President Obama said, this is a leap of faith worth making.
Claudia Salomon, thank you very much.
Thank you.